Standard 6, Instructional Practice, Part 2. Providing effective instruction. Accomplished teachers of English language learners create and maintain classroom climates of high expectations, sustained engagement, common goals, and mutual support among students. Teachers structure emotionally secure and intellectually rigorous learning environments where students may be included in developing rules and routines for effective learning. Students have a sense of belonging, accept the rules of the classroom community, take responsibility for their learning, and are eager to learn. Teachers facilitate students' language and content learning by upholding high standards for meaningful communication to facilitate instruction that leads to sustained academic achievement in all subjects. Accomplished teachers choose, develop, and modify instruction based on ongoing observations of students' linguistic needs. Teachers implement effective instruction by structuring lessons around pre-teaching, scaffolding, exposure, practice, and feedback. They recognize that structured routines, especially within lessons, are essential to the academic success of English language learners. Differentiating instruction in the language domains. Accomplished teachers understand that English language proficiency typically develops unevenly across the 5 language domains of speaking, listening, reading, writing, and visual literacy. A student may have strong reading skills, for example, but experience difficulty with fluent oral communication. Teachers therefore differentiate instruction according to each student's level of English proficiency in each of the language domains. Listening. Prior to practice in listening, accomplished teachers provide background knowledge that may include an introduction to or review of key vocabulary, grammar, or discourse structures. Teachers might scaffold instruction by implementing graphic organizers and setting a purpose for listening. To practice listening, for example, students might be asked to follow directions for a variety of tasks. Teachers recognize that English language learners need sustained, ongoing exposure to the specific language related to topics of study displayed in the learning environment. Teachers may display relevant posters and visual images with labels throughout their classrooms. To support the language objectives of a lesson or on requests, for example, a teacher might display cartoons created and illustrated by students in which the dialogues depict appropriate examples of language, such as requests for assistance, information, or advice. Speaking. Accomplished teachers model appropriate speaking for their students and incorporate opportunities for students to enhance their speaking skills. When introducing themselves at the beginning of the school year, for instance, early childhood teachers might model formal and informal introductions. Teachers could create environments rich with examples of the language of introduction and have students practice multiple forms of introduction using puppets. Teachers might have older students audio record their introductions and develop suggestions for improvement. Students could then introduce themselves to partners or introduce one another to members of a group or to the class with teacher and peer feedback. Teachers know how to create speaking activities involving students' prior experiences and knowledge, so students have a rich context for expressing ideas and are able to transfer their linguistic knowledge. Reading. Accomplished teachers introduce students to the power and enjoyment of literacy by selecting materials appropriate to the interests, cultural backgrounds, grade level curriculum, and language and literacy experiences of their students. Students read for a wide range of purposes, including basic comprehension, personal enjoyment, information gathering, and critical understanding. Accomplished teachers are knowledgeable about teaching phonemic awareness, decoding, vocabulary development, comprehension, and fluency as appropriate to students' grade levels and content area learning, focusing on students' specific needs. For example, a middle school science teacher might emphasize vocabulary development, while an early childhood teacher might focus on all 5 components. Accomplished teachers identify and pre-teach essential vocabulary likely to be unfamiliar to English language learners. Teachers employ effective techniques such as the use of visuals, semantic maps, translations, and realia to assist in developing key vocabulary and conceptual prerequisites that students need to understand texts. Because many English language learners arrive in U.S. schools with literacy skills and reading strategies already developed in their primary languages, teachers accelerate students' English literacy development whenever possible by building on these skills and strategies through cognate awareness and guided reading. Teachers direct students' attention to organizational characteristics of texts, such as headings, introductions, and topic sentences, as well as table of contents and the alphabetical ordering of glossaries. Accomplished teachers instruct students by drawing on multiple interacting systems of language knowledge in English: sentence and word forms, grammar, discourse, structure of texts, word meanings, and background knowledge. Teachers know how and when to emphasize vocabulary instruction and how and when to monitor for comprehension. Writing. Accomplished teachers differentiate writing instruction to address students' varying levels of fluency in writing. Teachers know when to offer English language learners choices in writing prompts and when to select topics and assignments appropriate to students' culturally based experiences, English language proficiency, writing abilities, and grade level expectations. Accomplished teachers reflect on the sources of students' writing errors and provide clear, direct instruction to explain target forms. Teachers model the writing process, provide word banks and sentence frames, and provide students with thoughtful feedback to improve their writing in English. Teachers also guide students in using appropriate resources such as editing checklists, scoring rubrics, and peer and teacher conferences so that students can identify their own strengths and limitations and effectively edit and revise their writings. Teachers provide specific, timely, and consistent feedback that students of diverse backgrounds can understand and incorporate into their writing. Teachers understand patterns of language used by learners as well as their avoidance of specific structures and skills and shape instruction and feedback to address aspects of language that students have not yet mastered. Visual literacy. Accomplished teachers design tasks that help students acquire skills necessary to communicate with visual information. To support students' language development, teachers pre-teach vocabulary and the process of interpreting graphic representations, evaluating media messages, and employing visuals to communicate. Teachers may use images such as photographs, political cartoons, illustrations from children's books, films, maps, charts, and graphs. In a lesson on persuasion, for example, teachers might create an image bank of persuasive techniques used in print advertisements. To scaffold the lesson, teachers might have students view an image that employs a particular persuasive technique and then move to images representing more complex ideas, ultimately guiding students to choose an idea or product to advertise for a specific real audience and create their own marketing campaign that incorporates several images. Teachers might provide students with word banks and sentence frames to allow all English language learners to develop their English and to access new concepts. Throughout their classrooms, teachers could provide a variety of advertisements representing the distinct cultures of their students. When teaching visual literacy, accomplished teachers keep in mind that age, culture, and prior experiences contribute to students' abilities to interpret and use visual symbols. For students with limited experiences involving visual images, teachers might provide additional exposure to visuals and opportunities to interpret them. Engaging and motivating learners. Accomplished teachers' knowledge of students and strong command of English and other subjects comprising the curriculum provide the tools necessary to engage all students in language learning. Teachers recognize that students' needs and interests contribute to their language development, which is facilitated when each student perceives the personal significance of instruction. Teachers might incorporate topics and issues relevant to students' needs and interests to motivate them and to continue independent language and concept learning outside the classroom and extend their understanding of the world. Teachers seize opportunities to inspire students by helping them form significant connections between schoolwork and their daily lives and perceive the real-world applicability of language skills they learn. Teachers offer students multiple ways to attain success in their classes and structure activities to ensure meaningful language development. Accomplished teachers recognize the benefits of bilingualism and how it may contribute to English language learners' academic success. Teachers motivate students to maintain literacy in both their primary language and in English by connecting the cultural backgrounds of their students to content and language objectives. Teachers, for instance, might invite bilingual community members to discuss how bilingualism contributes to learning English as well as to their careers and to the community. Providing students with focused language instruction. Accomplished teachers know when and how to provide focused language instruction that promotes students' acquisition of and interest in English. Recognizing that language-focused activities are more meaningful to students when they understand texts they read and hear, and when topics of discussion and assigned books are relevant to them, teachers might allow for students' voices in curricular decisions, such as the choice of reading material. Teachers know that many students cannot develop academic English entirely on their own and, without focused language instruction, may reach plateaus at any level of English language development. Such instruction can include contextualized attention to distinctive sound contrasts, use of synonyms, varied word forms, and rhetorical features, and strategic tasks that integrate the functional uses of language. Thinking critically. While planning their lessons, accomplished teachers recognize that today's complex world requires multifaceted approaches to thinking and acting. Teachers challenge students cognitively at both individual and group levels by asking questions that elicit problem-solving abilities. Teachers employ a combination of activities and techniques, such as graphic organizers and word lists, which allow students to construct their own understandings of the material. Teachers analyze the linguistic and cultural demands of learning tasks that require students to think critically and that provide them with sufficient support. Accomplished teachers initiate tasks that foster inquiry, building students' capacity to communicate complex ideas. Teachers encourage students to ask questions that extend or clarify concepts, promote deeper thinking, or provide diverse perspectives. They motivate students to synthesize conceptual understandings verbally and in writing, constantly integrating students' English language development with academic content learning. By involving students in critical thinking activities, teachers develop language learners who challenge assumptions, engage in creative products, persist in explorations of difficult material, think substantively, and demonstrate a commitment to acquiring a high level of English language proficiency. Individualized instruction. Based on students' needs, accomplished teachers might teach particular grammatical structures such as relative clauses or question forms. They might teach useful discourse forms such as phrases signaling the courteous interruption or an expression of a difference of opinion. Teachers provide clear and accurate explanations with multiple examples, model the target language structures, and provide opportunities for students to practice these new language forms and functions through interactive tasks such as show and tell, role-playing, and simulations. Accomplished teachers pay special attention to the needs of students at varying English proficiency levels, content knowledge, and educational backgrounds, while adhering to appropriate curricula standards and timelines. When teaching reading, for example, teachers know when and how to explain vocabulary and give clear explanations informed by their knowledge and understanding of students' culture and English proficiency. Secondary social studies teachers might teach students at advanced levels of English proficiency how to use reported speech accurately and effectively in their writing. Teachers of mathematics may explain the interpretation of meaning and accuracy of forms for conditional structures used in algebraic expressions such as if X, then Y. Accomplished teachers scaffold instruction so that students can express themselves effectively. For instance, teachers might provide explicit instruction on how to summarize others' remarks or how to change the subject so that students can use these discourse skills effectively in conversational tasks. Teachers might also provide templates to guide students' oral and written production. A science teacher who teaches English language learners, for instance, might use sentence frames expressing sequence or cause and effect to help students report findings from an experiment. Teachers pose cognitively complex questions modified according to students' English proficiency and scaffold their ability to respond reflectively and with increasingly complex language. Teachers include activities that require students to interact orally in class. To extend students' classroom practice in academic language, teachers might structure opportunities that encourage additional practice during extracurricular activities or after-school homework clubs. Using the primary language as a tool. When appropriate, accomplished teachers support students' optimal learning through the use of their primary language to create meaning and engage in discussions about new concepts. Teachers are aware that students' knowledge of another language may complicate their comprehension of concepts expressed in English. For example, students may mistakenly associate the meanings of false cognates such as embarrassed in English and embarazada, which means pregnant, in Spanish. Teachers know that a strong literacy level in the primary language supports English language literacy development and learning. They acknowledge and value students' primary languages and encourage their development by creating environments rich in oral language use, print and visual literacy, and cultural diversity. In instructional settings where more than one language is used, teachers use both languages as teaching and learning tools when appropriate. Teachers keep linguistic and conceptual goals in mind when making language choices for instruction. They attempt to build on the linguistic abilities students bring to school and help them move toward greater understanding and use of English as a medium for learning. Accomplished teachers understand the limitations imposed on students' participation, critical inquiry, and creativity when all instruction is delivered in English. Teachers find ways to encourage the use of students' primary languages when appropriate. Teachers might group students according to language dominance, for instance, and use primary language materials when available. When more than one language is used for instruction within a classroom, teachers are careful to avoid practices that subordinate the status and use of one language to another. When language choice and use are determined by state or administrative regulation or by program requirements, teachers exercise professional judgment and implement formal and informal assessments to make choices about language use depending on the focus of instruction and the desired levels of student participation. Interacting in the classroom. Accomplished teachers know how to scaffold instruction to support students' use of language in increasingly complex ways. Teachers use a diverse repertoire of instructional approaches, strategies, and activities to increase students' interactions and language use. Teachers strategically implement collaborative learning, developing students' discussion skills and emphasizing the importance of listening carefully and responding thoughtfully and appropriately. These activities may involve role play, debates, interviews, structured writing, peer editing, and technology-based tasks that connect students to the real world. Teachers may address critical and creative thinking demonstrated through interviews and reports for classroom preparations and publications. Accomplished teachers skillfully encourage in students a willingness to use English even though they may make mistakes. Teachers know language is learned through approximation of standard usages, and making mistakes is an integral part of language learning. However, they are able to identify specific errors that do not necessarily disappear over time without instruction and offer students effective feedback. Teachers know when to model language forms, when to ignore language errors, and when to correct students explicitly and in culturally responsive ways. Accomplished teachers use simple, specific, clear, and consistent feedback that students of diverse backgrounds can understand and use to improve their English language proficiency. Teachers provide feedback in a timely manner, supplement it with additional instruction as needed, and monitor students' responses to feedback. Accomplished teachers are carefully attuned to evidence that reflects students' emerging capacities to monitor and self-correct language as they attempt new constructions and convey new meanings in English. Accomplished teachers recognize errors common to students of diverse primary languages and varying English proficiency levels. Teachers realize that English language learners often make errors related to overgeneralization that nevertheless indicate their learning of English. For instance, they might state, "He goed to the store." Teachers also recognize that some students, many born in the United States, who have not demonstrated sufficient progress learning English, might require sustained feedback focusing on specific language features that have ceased to develop. These features might include noun plurals, subject-verb agreement, verb tense, modal auxiliaries, compound complex sentences, articles or fixed expressions such as on the one hand and on the other hand. Teachers provide students opportunities to benefit from feedback focused on these errors. Encouraging students to become independent learners. Accomplished teachers guide students as they become independent learners by teaching learning strategies that foster language development and subject matter mastery. Teachers know that intellectually active students are successful learners. Therefore, they offer students clear explanations, explicit modeling, and guided practice in techniques used by strategic learners, such as how to navigate textbooks, maintain organization, and use reference materials, including those on the internet. As a result, students take ownership of strategies and apply them independently to improve their knowledge of language. Teachers recognize that such strategies empower students to succeed academically by giving them confidence to recognize their needs, cultivate their strengths, and undertake the challenges of English language learning. Incorporating assessment. Accomplished teachers recognize that assessment is a continuous cycle in which assessment of learning informs instruction, while instruction informs assessment. They infuse effective assessment strategies throughout their instruction. See Standard 7, Assessment. Reflection. Accomplished teachers continually analyze their instruction, evaluating objectives, lesson plans, timing, classroom management practices, and classroom environments in terms of student learning and development. Teachers further critique success in planning, preparing for, and delivering instruction by reflecting on their knowledge of students, culture, second language acquisition, content area curriculum, and of the English language. To enhance students' simultaneous access to academic content and English language learning, teachers' effect on the learning environments they create and on their use of instructional resources, teachers observe students' progress in acquiring specific features of language and, upon reflection, build connections between students' current levels of knowledge and their functioning at more sophisticated levels of performance. Teachers also reflect on the degree to which their instruction communicates high expectations and fosters student success.